Hello, everyone. Good day. Welcome to our online class. This is our day two, studying contemporary worship style. What does the worship style have to do with church growth? This is the question that we're going to answer while we are studying our whole topic for today. Also, all the lessons that you are going to learn with these lessons for today and also all the topic that we're going to study from this course would be a big help for you as a pastor of the church, as a leader of the church, as a member of the church to observe your worship style and to add more new ideas that you can establish, new ministries that you can establish to attract more people to come to your church because of the worship style that you are using and applying in your church. Because worship style would be a big reason for your church to grow. Church growth has been at the center of discussion for an even longer time, and worship style became hot topic in every churches. Even if you're going to study the history of the church, you will know that they had the same problem that we have right now in our church, and that is church growth. Many churches in our generation right now, they are struggling in their church growth. And it's good that we are now studying this contemporary worship style because, like what I said a while ago, this course will help us to see the things that we can do, the things that we can establish in our church to attract many people come to our church. Okay, let's answer these questions. Number one, does one particular worship style typically attract more non Christians than another? What do you think is the right answer? Yes, if your worship style would attract many non Christians in your community. So it is your job as a part of the church to observe your worship style and to observe your community. If those things going to be in one, because people attracts what is attractive to them. So if the worship style that you are using in your church is fit to the community that you are with or your church were established, I am sure that you will attract many non-Christians around your community. Okay, question number two. Should a church change its worship style in order to reach more unreached people or more unbeliever? Do you think it's the best thing to do for the church? What do you think is the answer? Okay, my personal answer is yes. In order to reach more non-Christian or unbeliever. The same thing of the answer that I gave in question number one. Because people go to your church because they liked what you are doing inside the church. So for me, in order to reach them, the church need to change their worship style. Or if you don't like to do that, you have to give lots of effort to make your community embrace the worship style that you have, that you are implementing to your church. I answered yes to change the worship style But I'm not answering to change the biblical principle of your church and the doctrine of your church. We're talking about the worship style because people attract what they like and what they want and what is attractive for them. Question number three. Should worship ever be considered an evangelistic tool or materials or way? What do you think is the answer? The answer is yes for me because worship is one of the way to prepare the heart of people for them to listen in the word of God, to evangelize people. Worship is part of the program for evangelistic event. So worship is considered as evangelistic tool to evangelize an believer. No denying that worship and church growth are linked together in the minds of most ministers, either positively or negatively. That's normal. It's happening in every churches. There are a group of people inside the church because there are a group of people that they have their own mindset and how they understand things inside the church and how they observe it. And they think sometimes for you they are negative, but in their side they are positive. And then in their mind that you are negative, but in your mind you're positive. So it's normal happening in the church. Like, do not be surprised if there are people like that in the church. The thing is how the pastor or the head of the minister or head of the church going to manage these things inside the church. Why worship became a hot topic inside the church? Simply because of a mixed generation. We all know that inside the church, we have old people, we have young people, the old generation, and the new generation. Sometimes many old people want a solemn ambience, quiet. After singing hymns, they will sit down and listen to the pastor for the topic of that day. And we have the young generation, which what they want is to have a band, different kind of instruments using in the church, different kind of games, approaches that it is fit and attractive to them. That's the reason why for me, why worship became a hot topic in the church because of different generations in one church. But again, what I said in the last slide, it's the job of the pastor or the other leaders and ministers to manage these things to have harmony inside the church. In this quote says, whether people bow down before their God on the bank of the Nile River, the Yangtze River, the Ganges River, or the Mississippi River, they all bow down for one reason, to worship. Why? Because we were made to worship. That is the reason why God created people in this world. to worship God, to worship Him. The only problem for these things is, who are we worshiping? Are we worshiping the true God, or we are worshiping the other God? That's the only problem. But the one thing in common is we are all oriented, and we know that all of us people were made to worship. The same thing of what this statement saying. Worship is one of the primary, means number one, corporate acts of any local congregation, means the church and people in the church. It is also provides one of the church primary, again, first priority, points contact with the world. So worship is important in every churches. Worship style is important to every churches because this is the corporate act of a local congregation and a point contact with the world. That's why worship style and worship is important to discuss, important to prioritize in every churches. Why I'm saying that worship is important or worship style is important? Because worship is becoming the front door of the congregation. The first place where lost people or non-believer or unbeliever or non-Christians will go if and when they attend a church event. The front door. It means when you invite them in your event or you invite them to go to your church, the front door for them is the worship style, is the worship. If that worship would be a attractive to them or if or not. So we will know the result. If you do an event to your church and or you invite them to your church to attend your worship service one Sunday, and then observe them, observe the people you invited or the group of people attended to your church event, if they will come back next time. It means the worship style that you are applying in your church is attractive to the community that you have around you. Again, the worship is becoming the front door of the congregation. The church growth movement has refocused the attention of both ministers and laity, or the common people, ordinary people, on the priority of Great Commission for each local congregation. They did this because they see the importance of going back to what is the reason why the church built, what is the reason why Jesus started it, and why the first Christian fight and sacrifice their life for this, because of the great commission that Jesus gave to every first Christian disciples and every believers to do it. The church growth movement refocus the attention because most of the people in the church forget it, that this is the main goal of the church. We need to know the well balanced understanding of church growth. We have to understand it so we can work together. Inside your church, need to understand it. Inside of every churches, need to understand it. The well balanced understanding of church growth. So every people inside the church, member, leaders, and ministers, pastors, can work together to help the church grow. These are the four key dimensions of church growth are growing up, growing down, growing in, and growing out. Consider these dimensions of growth and how each of it relate to worship. We are going to study these four things to see how it is related to worship. Let's go to growing up. This growing up focusing on spiritual maturity. Worship contribute to our spiritual maturity and growing up in several ways. It means it is more personal and spiritual growth. Your prayer life, your testimony, your personal life, your relationship to God, personally, this is the growing up, your spiritual maturity. It always starts within yourself. That you need to be mature spiritually for you to be able to help your church to grow. So, growing up. Also, growing up, focusing in spiritual maturity says it reminds us who God is. Also, it teaches us how to pray and models prayer for us. And number three, we find the needed inspiration for ongoing spiritual recommitment. This is the growing up would help us. That's why we need to know this. Next, our growing down. Okay, next, the growing down. Growing down, focusing on truth and understanding. So, this is most of us regard that sermon is an important avenue of teaching in a church. So this is more about teaching people in the church, teaching about Bible in the church. And let's go to the next slide to have more explanation about growing down. This means that the pastor is both primary teacher and resident theologian with a congregation. Primary teacher and resident theologian because the pastor would be the teacher of a basic principle of Christian life and Bible, that is primary teaching, going to the deep understanding each word in the Bible, every verses, chapter that the pastor is going to explain to every member of the church for them to have the good understanding of the Bible. In addition to that, congregational singing plays the same role of teaching about God. A church member once related a personal story that confirmed the power of hymnody in the Christian life. Singing plays the same role of teaching about God because the lyrics of the song of every hymns and songs also get it from the Bible. So the lyrics of the song is teaching the people about God. That's why it's part of the growing down, going to the people. We are teaching people about God, about Bible, and singing songs and hymn, also teaching them about God because we have telling how great is our God, how God provides everything, how beautiful is our God. So singing and the lyrics of the songs teaching also about God. And the other thing that the church teaching the people of the church or the congregation, the ordinance of the church, which means it teach us about the nature and character of God. Also the church teaching people about baptism and the Lord's Supper. So the church also led the people experiencing it, the baptism when they believe in Jesus, and then the next step is to be baptized. And the Lord's Supper means We are remembering what God sacrifices for us and what Jesus did for us to have salvation. And also, it led Christians to a deeper understanding of the essential message of the gospel, which is the forgiveness of sins and the new life available in Jesus Christ. So, this is the church teaching in every member of the church. Sermons, songs, and signs are all possess great potential for helping us to grow down deeply and become rooted in biblical truth. This is very important because this must be the result, applying all those things. That in every member of the church, ministers, leaders, everyone must be rooted in a biblical truth while teaching them the sermon, teaching them all the ordinances of the church, singing songs, studying all signs. It must be resulted of being rooted in biblical truth. Next, the growing in. This growing in, focusing in fellowship and ministry. So we should not overlook the power of corporate worship to enrich fellowship. In the next slides that we're going to see, it will also help us to have more understanding about this growing in. So let's go. We have shared through Christian fellowship as we have sung, prayed, and listened to a sermon. We cannot question that. I also believe in that. That every time that we are singing together, pray together, and listening together with the sermon of the pastor in the church, we believe that we are ministering each other, we are having a good fellowship to each other. And that is the focus of growing in. The growing in is helping us to grow in fellowship, to grow in ministry. And the last one is growing out. So this growing out, focusing in evangelism and missions. So it means this is more about doing things outside the church. And in this topic, there are at least 2 points where the numerical church growth intersects worship. So let's study what is these 2 points to prove where numerical church growth intersects worship. The first point is worship is primarily means by which we are spiritually formed into outward looking person who realize that people need the Lord. This is good because this lesson is teaching us and helping us to understand what we have to be. We need to be a person looking outward, that a lot of people outside the church need to hear the salvation of Jesus Christ. Yes, that we are made to worship, but it is not telling us that we need to stay in the church. We need to do ministry inside the church. We need to do fellowship inside the church. It is not the main goal. It is not what this thing's teaching us. So a lot of people what they experience is they are reached out by those people going out and preach the gospel. So this is also what we need to do. For many people hear the word of God, especially around the church, the community around the church. We need to go out to visit them. We need to go out to see the people that need Jesus. And if we are going to open our Bible in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, verse 8, It says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?' And this is what Isaiah answered, 'Here am I, sent.'" I know that this is not easy. And as a missionary, I experience it. It's not easy to answer the calling of the Lord, especially if you're thinking a lot of things. But as a missionary who answered the calling of God to me, I am also encouraging you to be open, to listen to the Lord, what He is telling you to do. It's not saying that you need to go to other country. Just go out in your church. Continue to do evangelism, mission outside the church. Because those people you are going to preach the gospel is the people that you are going to invite to come to your church. So be open and listen of what is God calling you to do. And be open to say yes. That you are going to answer also to say the same as Isaiah said, "Here I am, sent." And this is the second point about growing down, to prove that numerical church growth intersects worship. So, people whom we are seeking to reach for Christ and evangelize with the good news, at some point in their spiritual journey, whether we like it or not, they will probably continue to attend as long as our worship services are meaningful to them or make them closer to God. It explained everything what we need to understand. So, worship service must be meaningful to them and make them closer to God. That is why worship style has a big role for the church growth. And this statement is clear that worship influences evangelism and missions directly. So we have to remember this. We have to know that how worship is important and also how this worship influences evangelism and mission directly, because you did not become Christian, you did not become the believer of God, you did not become the chosen of God, chosen people of God to sit down in the church. You are also called to do things outside the church, which is evangelism and missions. And worship influences these two things for you to go. Both theological reflection and practical experience prove that worship and church growth are intricately interwoven. So the picture, if you look at the picture, it will explain to us what is this intricately interwoven. They church growth and worship are like seems like locked together. They always be together that we cannot separate, because these things would help us to understand how important this two to be in the church and to be a primary focus of the church. These two final words we need to be spoken concerning worship and church growth. And this is the number one. We must refuse to regard either church growth or worship as a means to an end. Nothing is ultimate except God. If you remember the word well balanced church growth, this is what number one telling us to do. Maybe we put all our focus on the church growth and worship style, the church growth and worship style. And we give all our time, effort to that. But we forget God. So nothing is ultimate except God. We have to remember that. God first for everything to be balanced. That is the well balanced understanding of church growth. That there are a lot of pastors, members, leaders of the church focus everything to what they need to see, but they forget what God is waiting for them. Again, nothing is ultimate except to God. If we are going to open our Bible in Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, it says, "You shall have no other gods before me." So it is saying other gods. It means other things that you are focusing on. Yes, church growth is important. Worship style is important. Um, things in your life is important. But do not forget that put God first. Don't show to God that you have more time with these things in your eyes and you forget your responsibility, your obligation as human created by God, that you need to make him first in your life before anything else. Like what this statement teaching us, God is more important than either worship or church growth. Don't forget, these things what you see in your eyes is not the way for you to go to heaven. Even your church is big and your people are happy with that. And then they forget, and you also forget your God. It will not lead you to heaven. So this is what we need to remember. Again, put God first. And the well balanced understanding of church growth and worship follow. And number two, we must actively resist the temptation to manipulate people in worship services for our own purpose, especially if these purposes are determined by a church growth strategy. This is a warning, a reminder to everyone. We must be reminded and warned that we will not be like this, that we are going to manipulate people in every services, in every worship services that we have in the church because of our own purpose, just to focus on church growth. This is a warning. We must not be like this. Contemporary worship style. I hope everyone learned a lot about the importance of this worship style and how this worship style could help the church to grow. And for the pastor, member, leaders of the church must observe the worship style that we are applying and implementing to our church, that this must be attractive to the people or to the community that we have, or how things that we can do or what things that we can do to make them embrace the worship style that we are implementing in our church. Thank you so much for attending in our online class today and see you next week. God bless you all.